Hello, my name's Heather. I've been working with glass since about 2008. Welcome to my channel. Hopefully eventually I'll make this a more consistent thing, try to post some tutorials and such, but we'll see how it goes. So today we're doing a quick tutorial about Twistie cane. So Twistie cane you can use as decorative elements in your beads, you can leave them raised, you can melt them in, tons of things you can do with them. You can even form a ball at the end of them and turn them into sculptural things or bead shapes or whatnot. And they're just kind of fun. They're very satisfying to make. So it wouldn't be a YouTube video if I didn't ask you to like and subscribe, but really it would be helpful to encourage me to actually make some of these and spread some more knowledge. So if you have questions, if you have anything you might like me to make a video on in the future, please comment down below and let me know. All right, let's get on it. I'm starting off by pulling out a 12mm clear rod that I had garaged in my kiln. While it was garaged in the kiln, I still have to kind of cautiously introduce it to the flame. And I'm just fusing a standard Effetre white glass rod to the end of it. And once I have that fused, I'm going to flame cut about 1.5 inches or so length of that clear rod. That gives me a nice thick end piece that I'm going to encase in some white glass. So not only does this conserve some of the white glass that I have, it also makes it a little bit stiffer as opposed to how soft and soupy white glass can be. And I'm just cleaning up the end of both the glass rod and the attached piece that I'm about to work with, just so I have a nice smooth blank piece to work with. Giving the whole thing just a little bit of heat just to make sure it's not going to crack. And then I'm going to start encasing it in white glass. I'm just adding stripes of this glass along the length of it, butting them right up against each other. And I'm focusing the flame on the white glass. I'm not really heating up that clear much at all, just making sure it stays warm enough so it's not going to crack. But usually the ambient heat next to the flame takes care of that pretty well. As I'm drawing down these stripes of white glass, I am being cautious that I don't accidentally shock where the white connects with the clear. That is something I have to look out for. It happens frequently, so just something to be cautious of. And this process is a little bit slow. It is actually something that I sometimes prepare in advance. I make a couple of white blanks like this that are the combination of the thick clear glass with just a coating of white, and then I just put them in my kiln and I can heat them up and use them as I see fit. So once I have the entire thing coated in white, I'm going to smooth all that out so I have a nice smooth canvas to work with. You can see I'm pulling out all the transparent rainbow colors that I'm going to work with. Can't see it as much in the video, but I have a rod rest that will kind of preheat some of these glass rods for me. So I'm just kind of, while I'm heating this up and smoothing out the edges, I was just getting them ready to go on that rod warmer and trying to make sure they stay in order, so I actually keep them in a rainbow configuration. While I was distracted placing those colored glass rods, I accidentally let this white piece get just a little bit overheated, so it kind of lost its shape a little. So I'm just using a combination of my paddle and my graphite marver to just kind of get it back into a cylindrical shape. Now I'm using some black stringer to divide this cylindrical shape into 7 sort of equal size sections. I'm using just Effetre Intense Black Stringer for this. It's probably a little under 1 millimeter thick. You can use any size you're comfortable with, because in the end you're going to be pulling this out to pretty thin. This is just what I had already ready on hand. To divide this into 7 sections, I usually kind of mentally divide this into thirds. And then whichever of these thirds is too big, I will divide that too big third with 2 lines and divide the smaller ones in half. This doesn't have to be perfectly even, that's just mentally how I divide it relatively evenly into 7 equal pieces. I'm also making sure to add a little bit of heat to the stringer I applied, just to make sure it doesn't pop off as I'm working if it gets too cool. You can see I'm just kind of looking down the length of it to make sure it's sort of kind of even. Now I'm going to melt in the black stringer that I just applied. Be cautious not to add too much heat to this, just because the black stringer can tend to get a little bit cooked and get a little bit fuzzy. You can even leave it slightly raised. But let the white cool off a little bit before you start layering on these transparent colored glasses. So I'm starting with some red, striking red. And just like any encasement, I am keeping the glass rod in the flame and keeping the base out of the flame just next to it. Heating up the tip of the transparent glass and just pressing it up against that so it spreads out a little bit. And I'm using my brass shaper to just kind of squish down this transparent glass, just to kind of help it spread out, and also to try and completely cover that section of glass that I have defined with the black stringer. Next up I have my transparent orange. Doing the same thing, just trying to get it buttered up against that red glass that we already laid down. And trying to keep most of the heat on the transparent color as opposed to the white glass. And again, just pressing it down with that brass stump shaper. Just trying to spread out that transparent glass. And I'm just going to repeat all those steps with the yellow, green, cobalt blue, purple, and then violet. So I'll probably speed through that for you. And I think I might have overdone it with the yellow here, because I can see that using that brass, I'm just kind of pushing it into shape to kind of keep it in those black borders. And now I'm just going through and just making sure there's no white that's sticking out. So if there's any gaps where maybe I can see the black stringer that's not very well encased, or I can see a little bit of the white, I'm just kind of heating the transparent color that's around the white and just pressing it down with the brass. So I have all the glass that I want for color on this. Now I'm just going to add one final thin layer of clear. You don't have to do this. I just like it for in case there's any black glass peeking through, because when I get this super hot before the twist, I would rather avoid distorting that black glass by overheating it. So I'm just adding a very thin layer of clear. You won't really notice it in the final product. It'll just help protect any colors that might boil. And just like I did with the colored glass, I'm just heating up the clear layer and just kind of pressing it down a little bit with the brass just to fill in any gaps that I might have missed. Now it's time to fuse some handles onto this mass of glass. You can use borosilicate, you can use chopsticks or thick mandrels, it's up to you. I just like to make sure I'm using some sort of stiff handle, so I'm not using a pastel color. I'm just using whatever transparent I have handy. Now I'm going to melt off that white handle and replace it with something transparent, because when you're twisting this, you don't want your handle to get hotter than the mass of glass and have that be what comes off. And I'm using my tweezers to just remove some of this excess glass, just a little bit of white nub at the end. And I'm just heating it up and pressing it down to the end, just trying to maximize the amount of twisty I get for this piece of glass. And I'm attaching another piece of transparent glass to the other side. Again, you can use whatever you choose if you want borosilicate, mandrels, whatever. Make sure that both handles are the same diameter. Now it's time to start heating this mass of glass. Now I'm making a pretty good size twisty here, so I have a large amount of glass. You can work smaller. You don't need to make something that's this size. I just find this more efficient for me. But you can always work with something smaller and work your way up as you get more and more practice. But you can see that this blob of glass is maybe 2 inches long, and I'm just kind of going from side to side. And I'm adjusting the angle at which I'm holding this to kind of help the flame go up the length of the glass. The biggest mistake I see when I see other people doing twisties is just adding not enough heat. And especially with this large amount, you have to make sure the core is the same temperature as the outside. And notice how I'm heating it up, but I'm taking it out sometimes to kind of let the heat equalize. I want to let some of that heat penetrate to the center while letting the surface cool off a little bit so it's not out of control falling off these glass rods. So don't be afraid to take your time with this, but also take it out of the flame so it can cool off on the outside while still keeping a good heat base on the inside. And I'm starting to twist this a little bit. I'm not pulling it apart. I'm not stretching it. I'm just giving it a little bit of a twist as I'm heating it up. Not only will this kind of help me get a feel for how hot and soupy the glass is, it also just kind of kick-starts the twist pattern before you start stretching it. You can see that I'm making sure I add a lot of heat to the ends of this mass. As usually when you pull this, it has a tendency to get thinner in the center and thicker on both the outside edges, kind of like a dog bone kind of shape. So I'm trying to compensate for that. And now I'm starting to do my pull. I'm just doing a little bit at a time. don't be afraid to go back into the flame a little bit, just kind of rocking back and forth, trying to get the thick parts nice and warm. But make sure you don't just stop in one section and heat it up, or else that part will be super thin. So I'm pulling, I'm twisting, I'm doing both at the same time. And as I notice thicker sections, I bring it back into the flame a little bit and kind of rock back and forth. But this one, I had a pretty good heat base, so it pulled nice and evenly. I'm just trying to get a little bit more out of the thick end there. And then going to the other side and checking for the same thing. And to the side of the camera, I didn't capture it. I'm just using my disc nippers to cut this into a manageable size. And here's the finished results. And you see one side's a little thicker, one side's a little thinner, but I use them for different things. And here's the finished product, and then a couple items I like to make using my twisties. Thanks for watching.